Okay, well, good morning. I'm going to do a little housekeeping here first because we are having some internet trouble. So I would ask that anyone who is not using their camera and their audio just to turn it off right now. So that sometimes helps with some of this internet stuff. On behalf of the Tourism Coalition of South Dakota, we are pleased to welcome Rachel Flotz. Is that how it's pronounced?
Both. I'll take whatever pronunciation you want, though.
Okay. And Jesse McPherson of Call to Freedom. Call to Freedom is a South Dakota-based organization that's dedicated to bringing hope and healing to individuals impacted by human trafficking and exploitation. Through survivor support, education, awareness, and collaboration with communities and businesses, Call to Freedom is helping people across our state better recognize the signs of trafficking and understand how each of us can play a role in prevention and response. We are grateful to have you today and to share your expertise and help the tourism industry better understand what we can look for and what we can do when something doesn't just quite seem right. So ladies, welcome. If you take a moment to introduce yourselves, give us a little background, and then take it away.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. We are thrilled to be here for this invitation, the opportunity to share about the work and mission of Call to Freedom. Thank you, Carmen. My name is Rachel. I've been on the team here at Call to Freedom for a little over 3 years, and I have the privilege of serving as Call to Freedom's Director of Program and Prevention Services. So yeah, I'm very humbled to be able to do what I do every day and to be able to serve victims and survivors of trafficking and exploitation. And I've been working in the anti-trafficking field for about 10 years.
And my name is Jessie McPherson, and I'm the Outreach Site Coordinator here in Rapid City. I've been with Call to Freedom since December 1st of last year, and I've been in the victim services world since 2019, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, so just a kind of a brief history of Call to Freedom. Thank you, Carmen, for sharing about our mission and vision. Like Carmen said, we exist to provide hope and wholeness to folks impacted by trafficking and exploitation. We were founded by an incredible woman named Becky Rasmussen back in 2016. And so this year marks our 10-year anniversary as a nonprofit. And a lot of incredible things have happened over the course of the past 10 years. Namely, just an increase in the general public's awareness and ability to appropriately identify and respond to human trafficking. So we'll share a little bit more about some statistics from Call to Freedom's end about how many folks we've served within our 10-year history. But an important kind of growth point for us is just recognizing that because human trafficking happens in every community, in every zip code, in every locality across the globe, including across the state of South Dakota. In the tail end of 2025, Call to Freedom opened its first satellite office in Rapid City, out of which Jessie and her team are located, as well as our office here in Sioux Falls, which I'm located. And so we're really grateful to kind of just speak to the services that exist statewide in all 66 counties and 9 tribal nations contained within the state. So you've already heard about us. We'll share at the end as well our contact information if there's anything that you want to reach out to us about directly, whether identification and response, resources, materials, anything of that nature. We do always just like to begin all of our presentations with a content warning. This training, and the topic of human trafficking intersects with topics including sexual and physical violence. And so we know that statistically, it's probably likely that at least one person on this call has lived experience of those issues or very close relation to it. So we just want to make sure that you all feel comfortable to step away at any time. Your safety and mental health are our priority. We won't be offended if you need to log off or step away. Know that there are no graphic imagery or videos within this presentation, but it's hard to talk about, and we just want to be open and transparent about that reality. Our goal for today, we have a few things that we'd love to tackle together. We do want it to be the highest return on investment for your time. We know that your time is so valuable, so you taking out an hour out of your day to join us, we're really grateful. And so please, whether it's in the chat or via email, any questions, scenarios, any way that we can add value for you all, let us know. Our goal, we hope to leave this conversation today with the ability for each of us to be able to define the topics, including human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. to be able to identify common indicators of potential trafficking victims and survivors when we're out in our personal and professional lives. When we do come across someone, what does that bystander intervention look like? How do we report and refer appropriately, both to victim services like Call to Freedom and to law enforcement when that's the best and most appropriate option as well? And we'll share a little bit about what we can do, what services that we offer at Call to Freedom, the intake process, so that if you're talking to someone out in the community who you believe needs our help, you know a little bit about what they'll go through throughout the intake assessment side of it. We'll also share about some resources that we have at our disposal, how you can get access to those resources, whether it's more training information or physical resources like flyers, pull tab posters, business cards, whatever that might be. All right, so we'll just get right down to it. So what are we actually talking about? What is human trafficking? Human trafficking first became a crime in the United States in the year 2000 via a piece of legislation called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which that fact in and of itself always kind of boggles my mind, that when I was born, when Jesse was born, I think maybe everybody on this call, human trafficking wasn't a crime. It was not something that existed in the lexicon. It wasn't something that we were talking about as a nation, certainly not talking about it in South Dakota. And stateside, here in the state of South Dakota, it didn't become a crime until the year 2011, which there again, my goodness, it's been a short history that we've defined it. We've kind of outlet, here's what it actually is. And so there's still a lot of kind of consciousness raising and awareness that needs to happen. So I'll say it again, probably 100 times. We're really grateful for your willingness to dive into that awareness. So what actually is it? Human trafficking at its core, and put most simply, it's the use of force, fraud, or coercion to exploit a person for one of two purposes, either commercial sex, which we would call sex trafficking, or forced labor, which we would call labor trafficking. And so another way to think about it, it's really sex trafficking in particular can often be said to be the buying, selling, or trading of sexual acts. It's the full exploitation of another person, commodifying their sexuality, their personhood. And it is that, it's commodification. It's the commercializing sex. So we like to break down that term as well, that when we say commercial sex, what do we mean by that? Put most simply again, a commercial sex is sexual activity of any kind in exchange for something of value. It could be money. It could also be things more simple, like food, substances, a roof over your head. And so this has really important implications, I think, for us as South Dakotans, and why we see very high rates of human trafficking within the state of South Dakota. That when you think about and break down that definition, when we have really high rates of poverty, when we have really high rates of homelessness and housing instability, those vulnerabilities allow for bad actors and traffickers to exploit them. That when they know a person is in a place of desperation due to their economic situation, due to their housing situation, or any other vulnerability, they'll use that force, fraud, or coercion to exploit them, to induce them to be engaged in commercial sexual activity. They're buying, selling, or trading those sexual acts. Really importantly, the law rightfully treats children differently. And so there's an important distinction here that we all need to make sure we're aware of. That when it comes to a minor or someone under the age of 18, it's important to know that he or she, if they're engaged in commercial sex, he or she is automatically a victim of human trafficking under federal law and under state law here in South Dakota. So what do we mean by that? The force, fraud, and coercion piece do not need to be present in that case. And so you can think of it this way. In the cases of adults, the law and legal minds or law enforcement, when trying to figure out whether an adult is freely consenting to commercialized sexual activity or not, that's when we look to that force, fraud, or coercion. We say, well, are they being forced to do it? Are they being defrauded? Is someone lying to them or manipulating them? For children, we need not ask those questions because they cannot consent to commercial sex. Period, full stop. And so a child engaged in sex for something of value or perceived value, again, whether it's a place to live, whether it's video game currency, whatever that might be, he or she is actually a victim of human trafficking. So it's a really important distinction that we like to unpack. We also wanted to outline the term commercial sexual exploitation, as Call to Freedom serves clients who are impacted by this crime type as well. Commercial sexual exploitation is that buying, selling, or trading of sexual acts that we've been talking about. A little bit different. You can think of it like an umbrella term or a spectrum of exploitation. That if sex trafficking is here, and in the cases of adults, we do need to be looking at, are that force, fraud, or coercion present to distinguish, is this sex trafficking of an adult or is it not? Commercial sexual exploitation, it's often present, force, fraud, or coercion within those cases, but it's just a different tier, a broader umbrella, kind of generalized, of which it's kind of like a rhombus square problem, if you will, that sex trafficking is a specific subtype of commercial sexual exploitation is one way to look about it. So we know that Call to Freedom does serve individuals who are impacted by sexual exploitation, in which I put more simply, perhaps it's a bad actor of any kind, just exploiting a person's, again, personhood, sexuality. So we serve people on all ends of the spectrum, as well as labor exploitation too. So on the labor trafficking side, the forced labor is when, just like that term says, you're forcing someone's labor services that they can't freely and enthusiastically consent to that, or it violates their rights under state or federal law as a worker. So this takes many forms, most commonly the withholding of wages, the misrepresentation of the working conditions themselves. Yeah, I think those are probably the most common. But here, because Jesse's an expert as well, I just want to make sure, Jesse, is there anything that I missed or that you would like to add on the definitions of these topics?
No, you did not miss a beat.
So we've talked about the definitions, so we know what it is. Most commonly then, it'd be natural for us to ask, well, I understand what it is, but does it really happen here? And we understand that question. We're both, Jesse and I, are very proud South Dakotans. We love living in South Dakota. We love its safety and sense of community. But rest assured, it happens here in South Dakota in every community. On the screen here, what you see is some Call to Freedom internal data going out year by year back to 2021 through the most recent calendar year, 2025, with the number of unique individuals that Call to Freedom served. So you see a pretty stark increase year over year, including us having served 527 victims and survivors in 2024, and then 487 in 2025. In total, in our 10-year history, Call to Freedom has actually served over 1,850 clients, which is just really staggering. And I'd caveat that figure as well by saying that in the very early days, back to 2016, we didn't have the data infrastructure that we did to really meaningfully and authentically track the number of people. So it's likely a pretty significant undercount. So know that it's a pretty serious issue, and this is the only internal data. It's also driven by staff capacity. We're a mighty team of approximately 30 full-time staff members at Call to Freedom, where we've grown our team year over year. So too grows our capacity and the ability to serve. So it's pretty linear, and you can think about, we know that so many more folks have been impacted by these forms of violence who need the services and care. So I'll say it again, we're grateful for your willingness to learn about how you might be able to play a role in getting those individuals hooked up with our services and care. Some really important trends that we like to draw out, and I apologize, I didn't have the ability to crunch our 24 to 25, but I would say I know pretty confidently that these trends continue all the way into 2026. But when we looked back between these 2 years of Call to Freedom to see what's really happening and are there trends that the general public and us at Call to Freedom should be aware of, a few things really jumped out to us. The first was that we saw 18% more youth and year over year. We define youth as individuals ages 0 to 24. And in 2025, we had probably our most heartbreaking statistic of all, which was we had our youngest client served to date, a 2-year-old child qualified for our services in 2025. We also that same year served a 75-year-old individual. And so it does impact people of all ages, but when we look at the data, we know for a lot of different phenomenon and causal factors, including technology facilitated abuse being very rampant against youth. Youth are disproportionately impacted by this crime and violence and have some pretty unique and distinct vulnerabilities. Oftentimes when we talk about human trafficking, it's talked about in a very gendered way. And as a woman, I deeply understand that and want to give time and space to the fact that the violence against women perpetrated in the United States is rampant as well. However, human trafficking and exploitation are crimes that impact people of all genders and backgrounds, including men and boys. And we saw a very stark increase in the number of males that we are serving, especially on the labor trafficking side. Our data internally tells us that males were more likely to be served, having qualified under victims and survivors of labor trafficking, but of sexual crimes as well. And I think that's an important thing to confront, that we need to be creating a society in which men and boys can feel safe to disclose their experiences and their need for services, including when they have experienced sexual violence. And lastly, perhaps unsurprisingly, very sadly, is the growth in the number of clients who self-identify as American Indian or Alaska Native. I mentioned that we do have 9 tribal nations contained within the state. Folks who identify as American Indian make up about 9% of the state's population. They make up about 42% of those human trafficked within the state. They are disproportionately impacted by this crime for a variety of reasons, including jurisdictional challenges that make it very hard to identify and prosecute trafficking committed on tribal land, as well as our state's kind of continued history of committing violence against Native people. So I think that's a reality that we have to confront as well, is that they continue to make up a large percentage of those that we serve at Call to Freedom. Jesse, is there anything that you would add here?
I would not know.
So some more data, because we're all pretty big nerds here at Call to Freedom. We wanted to draw out the what we call the relationship to offender and what that can look like. Human trafficking doesn't always present in the way that the media or movies might tell us. I don't know if any of you might have seen the movie Taken with Liam Neeson. You know, it can be that dramatic and it can look like this, be kind of stranger to stranger situation. However, data would tell us nationally within the state of South Dakota and Call to Freedom data that more often than not, a victim survivor actually knows his or her perpetrator more often than they don't. And a couple really stuck out to us here. When we dove into our 2025 data of clients that we served, this would be out of those 487 people, about 33% of them, a third, were victimized by their intimate partner or a dating relationship. So it can and often does happen in romantic and spousal situations. Similarly, and this is a new and emerging trend, I think growing for us at Call to Freedom and within South Dakota specifically, is this concept of familial trafficking. And it'll turn your stomach, but it is exactly like the name would suggest. It's trafficking that's perpetrated by a family member against a member of his or her own family. And so with that, it was 1 in 4. It was 25% of our clients were victimized by their own parent or a family household member, which is really important to note that that figure in South Dakota's averages are higher than national averages on the rates of familial trafficking. And so that's a reality that we have to confront too, and we should keep that stat in mind as we think about what bystander intervention looks like. We want to make sure that you know that we are operating all across the state of South Dakota. And so shaded in blue, you see counties in which Call to Freedom has served, whether that be client services, trainings we've conducted, technical assistance we've provided. We can and will go anywhere. So wherever you and your business, your team are located, know that we're there to help support. We'll share more about the services that we provide, so I won't speak on this for the sake of time. However, our team's busy. In 2025, it was over 16,000 individual services, anything from budgeting to legal advocacy to medical care. So how does this impact you, and what does tourism have to do with this? We'd like to know out the gate that trafficking happens in every industry, in every community. And so what we're asking is always, how can we, given our role in industry, be aware and on the lookout for what weaknesses might exist in this system? So I don't want the message to be tourism is this hotspot for trafficking. It's the only place, it's the bad guys, it's the good and bad. That's too binary and too black and white. It happens everywhere. It truly does. And so it's just about kind of reflecting upon what are those vulnerabilities and how do bad actors exploit them. And so we drew out some national data that Jesse and I found very powerful here, especially on the role of hotel and motels in human trafficking. And so you see on the screen here, national group called Polaris did a survey of trafficking survivors, and they found that of those surveyed, 80% had said that they had engaged in commercialized sex that occurred at a hotel. And 69% were using hotels during travel, oftentimes that they were being brought interstate or across different events or tourism events. 47% sought shelter at a hotel or motel when they were trying to exit an experience of human trafficking. And 20% stated that their trafficker housed them in a hotel. So we just found this very powerful, that there is such a role then for the tourism industry in this lane in particular to be that voice who can identify and respond, knowing that the vast majority of victims and survivors are coming into contact with these places of business. And so this quote from a survivor of human trafficking really stood out to us, where she says, quote, "The biggest red flag was that I was a child spending a lot of time around a specific hotel for literal years, and nobody ever asked questions. Nobody ever called the police." How powerful. And so for us, it's very harrowing. It makes me very sad, but it's also a call to action. That if that's us, if whatever industry or role or business that we're working in, it's a call to lean in, to educate, to take the indicators that you're going to hear Jesse present on today, to apply them and to follow through on your gut to make those calls and referrals. A couple other statistics that we pulled out. So going further on the hotel role in particular, there's another quote from the report that Polaris pulled together that said, despite how many victims are crossing paths with hotels, 94% disclosed that they never received any assistance, concern, or identification from hotel staff. That's another stat that kind of turns my stomach, but we can flip that and say, it's a call to action. It's an invitation really from us to you today and every day thereafter to say, we don't have to be a part of the 94%. Our goal is that through this training and through the education that you receive on the indicators and how to make that referral, that we can flip the script, that we can change the narrative to victims never receiving any concern or identification, to us always following through and making that call. And this survivor here says, quote, "Personally, I want everyone who works in the hotel industry just to identify. Don't get involved directly. I just want them to be able to identify it, to make that call." And so we're going to train you on exactly that component. I also wanted to very briefly speak about rental cars and travel and transportation, because that is such a big intersection with this issue as well. That 47% of survivors surveyed stated that rental cars were used during their trafficking situations, and for a variety of reasons. But I found this data very fascinating as well, that the methods of transportation that were used by victims or traffickers during their exploitation can tell us a lot. That they're using taxi services, rental vehicles, airplanes, buses, the Greyhound systems, all of these different forms of transportation. And so it's really important for the tourism industry as well to be on the lookout for those intersections, knowing that data tells us many survivors, due to financial means or otherwise, struggle to afford their own vehicle. So what a call to action for us about we all have a role to play in knowing that some of those intersections here.
So recognizing red flags in tourism sittings, no single one of these means trafficking, but patterns is what matters. Physical or environmental signs could be physical abuse, malnourishment, or living in unsuitable conditions. Branding tattoos such as initials, crowns, property of names, usually it's like PO, and then there's an initial right after that, etc. When it comes to drug and substance related issues, such as an overdose, meaning many traffickers drug victims to keep them addicted or not disclose location or what assault is happening. So these physical indicators, they are very, very important to just kind of recognize. You can go to the next slide. Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't see you changed it. For the behavioral indicators, they may include sudden withdrawal, anxiety, depression, unexplained fear, or submissiveness. Suicidal ideation is pretty big, especially with youth now. A lot of people are unaware of their surroundings or location, especially if they're into that substance-related issues. And then reluctant to speak, which coincides with the situational cues. So, such as the situational indicators and cues. However, many victims have inconsistent stories. They are reluctant on explaining injuries or even avoid eye contact. And we do see that a lot with our clients here. Control indicators include someone speaking for an individual, controlling their documents, money, or movements. In short, you're not looking for proof. You are looking for patterns that just don't feel right. I love this slide, trauma-informed communication. So when we're responding to someone who may be experiencing trafficking or exploitation, our approach can make all the difference. First, we want to prioritize their privacy and their safety. If possible, speak with a person away from others and be mindful who may be listening. A private, safe environment helps build that trust. And then, of course, you use non-judgmental, person-centered language. Ask those open-ended questions. Avoid the blaming, victim blaming, and validate their life experiences. Simple statements as she provides right here is, thank you for sharing that with me, or many people in difficult situations feel this way, can help someone feel heard and supported. And then, of course, respect their autonomy. Don't pressure someone to disclose information or just accept help before they're ready. A lot of people don't know that they're victims of trafficking. Offer choices, be honest about their limits of confidentiality, and allow them to make informed decisions for themselves. I think that's really important, is allowing them to make their choices, because choices have been controlled by their trafficker or even their buyer. Finally, just focus on safety. Do not rescue. Your role isn't to solve everything in one conversation. Instead, ask what you need to feel safe right now. That may mean connecting them with housing, food, immediate shelter, medical care, addiction treatment, or victim services of sort. We have so many different victim services here in Rapid City as well as in Sioux Falls. Meeting immediate needs and empowering the individuals builds that trust, and it creates that opportunity for future support. Do you want to add anything to that one?
Honestly, you crushed it. Yeah, I think we've got some later slides that emphasize this point, but I just think Jesse said it so beautifully about not forcing. If it's a forced choice that has a lot of negative effects, like Jesse said, but it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be authentic if the person isn't in a place or ready or able, or it's not safe for him or her to seek care or help. So I just really like that point and how you laid it out. Beautiful.
So barriers to disclose. One of the biggest misconceptions about human trafficking is that victims will ask for help when they need it. In reality, many people don't because of fear, because of manipulation. There's threats to family, friends, or self, or because they don't recognize they are being trafficked at all. These are the very tactics of traffickers to use and maintain control. That's why we shouldn't rely on disclosure alone. Instead, we kind of focus on recognizing the indicators, building that trust, as well as creating that safe environment where everyone feels supported when they're ready to seek help. So When do I report? This is a really good one. A question we do hear often is, when should I report? The answer is simple. If you see signs of abuse, exploitation, or trafficking, or even have a reasonable suspicion, report it. Trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it's worth taking seriously. You don't need proof or to investigate on your own. Your role is to recognize the concerns and report them to appropriate authorities or, your organization's reporting process. Trust your first responders and investigators to determine what is happening. It's always better to report early than to miss an opportunity to help someone who may be in danger. One phone call could be the first step in connecting someone to safety and support. When in doubt, report. You are not responsible for proving abuse. You are responsible for recognizing concerns and taking action.
Beautiful segue. Yeah, I could not agree more. Obviously, Jesse and I agree because we share the same philosophy and team, but beautifully said. So how do you actually make that referral? We're going to break it down into two buckets. We're going to talk first about call to freedom, how to make a referral to us when it's the best and appropriate option. We receive client referrals, or something that we call intakes, via a dedicated phone line with the number that you see on the screen here. You can call or text that line on behalf of another individual or the victim survivor, the individual who's interested in seeking services themselves. We do want to be transparent about the fact that we don't kind of advertise it as a hotline or a crisis line. If it's an emergency situation or a life-threatening situation, nothing replaces calling 911. And so we still recommend that's the best and most appropriate course of action. So with that, our commitment is when an individual reaches out to this line, you should expect to reach back within 1 business day or less. We have 2 incredible staff members at present who staff that line 24/7. However, they are just 2 individuals, and so they do a great job safety planning and triaging and planning out. The minimum amount of information that we request, especially in the voicemail side of things, is a name and callback number. For certain industries, more so healthcare, we talk about how we might get it to a generalized line, or maybe you're at a hotel and we have only the generalized line. If there's a direct, direct line, however, we should be calling back to the most specific is always best. And so the amount of information that we really need is not much at all. From that individual, we just kind of need to know that they are interested in exploring services with us, how we can get a hold of them, what their first name is, and then we go from there. So it need not be, and you shouldn't envision it like a full detailed report like you would make to law enforcement. Through our kind of trauma-informed and motivational interviewing processes throughout the intake itself with an individual who wants to receive our services, we explore that with them to get them the details and information throughout that process. So an intake inquiry can be very simple and very short. And so for those of us who might envision ourselves as bystanders of making that referral process, I'll kind of piggyback on a lot of what Jesse has already shared very well. We'll reinforce this point that it's so important to offer but not direct. To say there's a big difference between saying call to freedom and do this versus, hey, did you know that call to freedom exists? And like I said, it's going to be a lot more successful for that person, for you, if it's presented as an option so that they can explore and pursue it when they're ready and when it's safe for them to do so. And so we always say it's offering, not directing. Discretion goes a long way, and it's kind of following our gut here on what's safe and most appropriate. We kind of, I believe it's in the law enforcement side of things, have some language too on oftentimes directly intervening in what you believe to be an active trafficking situation can be very unsafe for you and for the persons involved. It can actually escalate the violence against the victim survivor. And so using discretion is very important. Where Jesse earlier, you heard her give that tip on, try to isolate the individual if or when you're providing physical materials. And that's why that's so important. So call to freedom, we're going to share about this a little bit more later on. But because our goal is to ensure the safety of the persons impacted and for them to be able to pursue resources in a safe way, we offer some small kind of discrete cards like this Here to Help card, very small, but it's business card size, that has that intake line phone number. So it's very innocuous that you could pass it, as well as our pull tab posters. I hope you've seen them plastered all over all of the state. We have incredible team members and volunteer ambassadors who do that for us. That it is a pull tab style with the intake number, very intentionally designed that the pull tab itself only has the phone number. It doesn't say Call to Freedom. It doesn't say anything that would identify it as a victim service agency, for this very reason, that if it were to be found, it doesn't give away the fact that this individual might be exploring or pursuing victim services help. Jesse already spoke about this very well too, and so it's the confidentiality and safety of that individual. So maybe thinking about, it might not be safe for me to write down Call to Freedom on a piece of paper in a certain context if you feel like that might escalate a situation. So just being cognizant of that as well. And then avoiding judgment, presenting it in a matter-of-fact way and not judging or shaming. You might still hear, even in 2026, this very harmful question of, well, why don't you just leave? Mm-hmm. And Jesse already spoke on those barriers too, as to why. There's a million and one reasons, but that can be very harmful, and it actually can prevent help seeking for the individuals impacting. And so to just use very simple matter-of-fact language that isn't shaming or judging their experiences, that it's just matter of fact. It's objective. There's no kind of emotional valence attached to it, but we know that can be very hard. So with that, we presented kind of a simple script. You certainly don't need to memorize this or use it verbatim. However, we find that these kind of 3 steps work really well for bystanders. The first is support. Nothing replaces that the first thing that we're doing is human connection and empathy. That we're first, it's really pretty easy to know and see when someone needs help. And so it's following through on that and offering it, extending it to say, hey, you look like you're going through a lot, and I just want to make sure that you're okay. And is there something that you need or anything you'd like to talk about? And see how that's phrased as a question and not a, you look like you need some help. That can be that's that judgmental versus non-judgmental. It's restoring autonomy and options versus dictating what someone needs. And so we like that, phrasing it as an invitation, as a planting the seed, is that you look like, you're going through a lot, so how can I help you? Mm-hmm. So then the next step might be inform, just to the point of providing those options and choices, letting them know that places exist, like Call to Freedom. That Call to Freedom is an organization that offers free voluntary support and resources. So if you'd like, you could talk, or they could talk with you about options and supports, and they won't pressure you to do anything. You're in control of whatever happens next. And then seeing whether it's a good time to make that connection point, that if they're willing and able and ready and wanting that resource material, you can provide that contact information if it's safe, whether it's a here to help card, whether it's a pull tab, whatever that might be. And just stating that outright, that here's the information. You can reach out whenever you choose, whenever it's safe. Jesse, you've walked folks through this and received through client services a lot of this. What would you add or say on that?
Even if you're unsure, please just call us. We can call you back. We will direct you. We've had some few calls where people just need to be redirected. Also, if you're needing assistance in, taking down, reports with law enforcement, we can assist you with that too. So don't be afraid to call us.
Love that. It's a really good plug and great kind of segue too, and to that side of it of reporting to law enforcement. Just like Jesse said, we're here to be a resource within that, whether for you in making a report about another individual, about a group, about suspicious activity, or on behalf of someone that you believe is impacted by a situation of trafficking or exploitation. So first, we'll just reiterate the point here that no one should conduct quote unquote rescue operations of any kind except for trained law enforcement. That's not what Call to Freedom does. It's not our intent. We do aid in law enforcement in various capacities, but we trust them in their role to do those intelligence gathering and operations and the criminal justice side of things. So like we said, what we can do is help follow through on making those reports. If it is an emergency, call 911. That's always the direction that you'll hear from us. And if it's a non-emergency, the best first step truly is calling your local police department's non-emergency number. I would recommend saving that into your device. If you're unsure who that might be for you and your community, let us know. We can help you provide you that phone number for your local police department. We'd be very happy to do so. But there's also a really great tool that exists to report human trafficking within South Dakota specifically, that was developed by the Attorney General's Office and the Division of Criminal Investigation, or DCI, where it was meant to reduce silos of information across the state. So it's very common that traffickers act in across localities, or that they might be perpetrating against multiple people. There was a national stat a few years back, actually, that said the average trafficker has 7 victims. So with that, the state of South Dakota knew that local police and state police and federal law enforcement sometimes have information that could help one another, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't want Aberdeen Police Department has this information, but the FBI has this, and we're not talking to each other. So through this single form, an individual can report suspected human trafficking within the state of South Dakota and know that it will be shared appropriately across those channels so that they can do what they do best, which is investigate, build appropriate cases and responses, and know that these make a difference. They make such a difference regardless of what level of information you have. And here I would just reiterate what Jesse said earlier, which is following your gut to say, well, is this one license plate number and this one suspicious thing that I saw in a parking lot really enough, or does it merit a report? We assure you it does. And it's okay to put it unknowns or I don't have this information when filling out this report. Any amount of information can weave together a broader narrative, a broader story, knowing that traffickers act in part of broader criminal networks and patterns. And so law enforcement's really good at what they do and know that it's actionable intel that helps. I know Jesse has filled out these forms on behalf of and with clients as well. I don't know if you'd like to speak about some of the impacts it's had or advice that you have.
Yeah, so we are also connected with the South Dakota Human Trafficking Coordinator, Miss Mary Beth. If you have any questions, she is willing to help you. I didn't know a last name of a trafficker, and I just let her know, hey, I filled out a form. I need to edit because I found the last name, and she's quickly to respond. I think these are so important that we do because it actually helps build that case. Just like what Rachel was sharing. It's really, really helpful for law enforcement to connect the dots, especially across the state. DCI here in Rapid City is very, very helpful as well. Yes, we have a contact with them, but it also helps building that case. So if you ever have any kind of questions, we can walk you guys through this. Just keep it in your back pocket because it really does help law enforcement prosecute. So
1,000%. So what do we do about it? We want to share about Call to Freedom services, things that we can help on. We take kind of what we call a 3-pillar approach at Call to Freedom: prevention, intervention, and restoration. Just very briefly, although not the primary intent of this presentation, know that we engage in a lot of prevention, although arguably this presentation is exactly that. Education is inherently preventative in nature, and so we thank you again for your time. We provide a lot of evidence-based, age-appropriate education to K through 12 students and youth of all and people of all ages. So it's really, we believe, and evidence would tell us, studies show that human trafficking, exploitation, and abuse are preventable crimes. They really are, and education is so powerful. So we do that and have several staff members who full-time work on the prevention lens. But we know that there's a great need for those who are already impacted, or some tertiary prevention as well. So that's where intervention and restoration come in. In the intervention stage, we're focused on meeting immediate needs, safety planning, and like basic human needs. If you think of Maslow's kind of hierarchy, that's safety, that's housing, that's food, making sure that when and individuals have what they need to have their basic needs met is that intervention stage. And so it involves the intake and referral process, safety planning, and a lot of partnerships and collaboration. We rely upon a network of referral partners, including your industry and your businesses and social service and human services agencies, to do that, to intervene, to make those safe referrals and reports and bridge the warm handoff to services. And then restoration, Call to Freedom provides over 65 individual services through what we call a continuum of care. We recognized that trafficking impacts every conceivable aspect of your personhood, from your physical health to your mental health to your spiritual health. There's largely an area that goes unaffected because of the severity of the trauma and the abuse. And so we wanted to create a suite of services that don't duplicate or reinvent the wheel, but that would minimize the amount of times that survivors feel bounced around between systems or necessitate the retelling of that story. That I can't imagine having lived through the level of severe trauma that a lot of these folks have and needing to tell that story 10 times over, to go here to get housing, go here to get your mental health, go here to get your food pantry items. It's overwhelming. It's exhausting. It's not trauma informed. And so through what we've designed at Call to Freedom and with survivor input on how this should look, we have this suite of services to be able to provide connections and referrals and bridge that gap such that a person need not tell the same story over and over. But this is Jessie's world. She lives and does this day by day. So I love for her to speak about what does service delivery look like at Call to Freedom.
Let's just give an example. A client is needing another mental health therapist. What I would do is, of course, I would contact that therapist and just say, hey, I'm referring her here. She's having some issues with this other therapist. I would love to connect you. And they would take it from there. We want to make sure it's safe and they're able to, have that therapy session probably right away instead of months and months. Working with survivors, their healing journey, it's long. It's long. It's not a 30-day thing. It's not a 60 or 90-day thing. We're here forever with them as long as they need us. Sometimes we get fired 5 times a day, and sometimes we get rehired 10 times a day. And, we want our clients to know that we're here for them long term, and that journey, it's going to be all over the place and stagnant. You're going to have a great day one day, and one day you're not going to. And we're just here for them in that moment. Connecting clients with, reliable resources is very, very important to their journey, especially healing journey. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, she's exactly right. We do not place an end date on services. A client can remain within our care for as long as they desire, to the level of engagement that they desire. So we've had some who are there with us for 1 hour, one single session. We have one gal who's been with us for the full 10 years that Call to Freedom has existed. And of course, it's tapered and it's looked different over time because, like Jessie said, there's no linear perfect path towards healing. You don't get a rubber stamp certificate saying, congratulations, you're quote unquote healed from human trafficking. And so we designed our model with that in mind, that we're here so long as one or more individuals need us. And until that day, we'll always be here providing whatever suite of services meet that individual's unique needs. We wanted to share a bit too about what materials we have to be able to provide to you all, and especially some materials that I think would be really beneficial for businesses or individuals operating within tourism sectors. The primary one that probably is most impactful is those pull tab posters that we talked about. So you see an image of one here on the screen. It's meant to be a series of questions, open-ended, written in plain language, and many survivors' voices went into the creation of making sure that they're plain language, they're accessible, easy to understand, just prompting an individual to reflect upon his or her experiences. That, going back to the definition of human trafficking, trafficking itself is almost a misnomer. That when you hear the word traffic, or when I hear it, I sometimes think movement. Whether movement across international borders, state borders, county lines, and a person can be moved during and throughout a trafficking situation, but they don't have to meet the definition. And so oftentimes it's another reason why many folks might not self-identify their experiences as an act of human trafficking. They say, well, I've never left Cottington County my whole life. How can I have been human trafficked? And it's not until they reflect upon these questions about, well, are you earning money that you can't keep, that someone else is taking from you? They say, wait, that is me. And they start to reflect and see themselves, that then they prompted to pull this number. And like you said, it's very discreet in nature. It doesn't say anything about call to freedom, that we've had folks tuck it away in a cell phone case or in a shoe. And so the placement of these pull tab posters, they're very popular in restroom stalls or areas that are private, for private reflection and contemplation and easy access. They're really popular across all areas of the tourism industry, though. I think truck stops, rest stops, cabins, any scenario, hotels, lobbies, or the restrooms, any place that has people, especially high traffic or volume of people, is a really good place for these pull tabs.
Even camping sites out here and, for the rally and everything, I've been putting them everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned as well our Here to Help cards. So they are small business cards that have our intake line on them. We also have a lot of different brochures and topical flyers and resource guides. Thank you, Jesse. We have a beautiful one there. Tailored for different, subtopics, things that talk about call to freedom services, resources, how to make reports, some that even have different scripts that you can use. We also, for members of law enforcement, have some pocket guides on what human trafficking is, how to identify and how to navigate that. So to request materials, feel free to email the email shown on the screen here or give us a call. You could also reach out to Jesse or I, really any staff member that you reach out to, we'll make sure that you get the materials. And we deliver them in a variety of different ways, through staff and through a network of coordinated volunteers. We can also mail, and however the method that we can deliver to you, we'll work it out to meet your individual needs. And we have a very make it happen mindset. So we promise you whatever you need, we'll get it to you.
Mm-hmm.
So lastly, if this is sparking something for you, if this conversation has moved on your heart that you want to get more involved, we welcome you. The fight against human trafficking requires a lot of collaboration. It requires a lot of voices, minds, and hearts working together. And so if you feel like that's you and you want to get involved in a deeper capacity, we would love if you would join our network of incredible volunteers. Maybe it's hanging up those pull tab posters as an ambassador, or collecting freedom bags, meeting those basic needs of clothing and hygiene products for survivors. There's countless opportunities to volunteer, and we would not be here if not for volunteers. We were founded by incredible volunteers who did not take a paycheck doing this work full time for a long time. And so we love and appreciate all of the volunteers within our network, and there are opportunities statewide. Or if you're interested in becoming a corporate partner of Call to Freedom, it does take financial support to make these services possible. So feel free to chat with our development team. We would love to hear from you if you feel like you have the capacity or interest. And Jesse and I are both here. So with that too, we will show, here's our email addresses and direct phone numbers, as well as the intake line. And we just want to say thank you. Really from the bottom of our hearts. I mean, we mean it quite sincerely that doing these presentations is always a highlight of our day, because for not these conversations and people willing to engage with a very difficult, dark, and evil issue, we don't move the needle. We don't get people connected to services or provide hope and wholeness if we're not willing to dive in. So thank you for your time, for your willingness to learn, and to take this information back to your teams, to your agencies, to your businesses, to your personal and professional circles. We're here to help. We're here to provide more training. We're here to provide services. We're here to partner through with you, client situations or reporting, whatever that looks like. So we're really, really grateful. And if there is a format for anybody to have any questions to be able to, Jesse and I are happy to field those too.
Yeah, I don't see any on the chats right now, but if anybody does have questions, they can reach out to you directly, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And just so that everyone knows that's on the call, we will have the presentation deck. We will be sending that along with the rest of the materials that you sent me, Rachel, to the attendee list here. We will also have those documents available in our July newsletter. And the video of this will actually be on our YouTube channel as well. So there'll be a lot of different ways that attendees and those who weren't able to make it today to access this information. Like I said, I don't see any questions right now, but we really do encourage people to reach out to you because I know most of the attendees today were hoteliers. And so we really, really appreciate this information. It is very sobering, like you said. And great to meet both of you. We appreciate you sharing this information with us. And I just encourage our attendees, if they need more information, please do reach out. And yeah, unless you've got anything else to share with the group, I would say then we're probably going to sign off and be watching for these materials.
I appreciate your time. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. And thank you. You guys have a great day, okay?
You too. Bye.
All right. Thank you.